The landscape along the border between Israel and the Gaza Strip stretches wide beneath a pale sky. Armoured vehicles rest in still formation. Tanks that once moved relentlessly now stand quiet, their engines silent, their barrels pointed outward, as if waiting for instructions that will not come for the moment. Soldiers walk and inspect the heavy metal hulls, hands running along steel plates that have endured months of dust, heat, and uncertainty. For the first time in more than 2 years since the Hamas attack of October 7th, 2023, the Israeli government has officially lifted the state of emergency in communities near Gaza. The order, introduced in the days and weeks after the attack, reshaped daily life in the southern regions, granting authorities powers that deeply affected movement, education, and the handling of civilian activity near what remained a highly volatile border. Defence Minister Israel Katz stated that this shift reflects the new security reality in the south of the country. It is a phrase that carries significance because security in this region has never been simply a military term. It touches family life, agriculture, schools, and the psychological frame of daily living, the question of when it is safe to leave the house, or whether a siren may sound at any moment. The emergency measures once allowed authorities to restrict travel on public roads, temporarily close schools, halt public events, and remove fuel, chemicals, and other hazardous materials from areas deemed vulnerable to rocket fire. These decisions were not small adjustments. They reshaped how life functioned across towns and agricultural collectives up to 80 kilometers from Gaza. Now, in place of heightened readiness at all hours, there is a deliberate, cautious effort to signal a transition back towards stability. But this transition is complex because the end of the state of emergency does not mean the end of the conflict's consequences. Far from it. Even as life seeks to return to routine inside Israel, teams are at work inside Gaza, searching for the bodies of Israeli hostages who were taken during the 2023 attacks and did not survive. The search has now expanded with international involvement. A technical team from Egypt, personnel from the International Committee of the Red Cross, and, under certain conditions, representatives from Hamas have been permitted to cross beyond the Israeli-designated yellow line inside Gaza. The decision to grant this access is seen as a critical step in implementing the ceasefire agreement currently in force. That truce, negotiated with substantial involvement by the United States, relies on reciprocal obligations, the return of Israeli hostages, both living and deceased, in exchange for the release of Palestinian prisoners held in Israeli facilities. Standing before reporters in Tel Aviv, Israeli government spokesperson Shosh Bedrosian explained the latest developments. She stated, "The Red Cross, the Egyptian technical team, and a Hamas person have also been permitted to enter beyond the IDF's yellow line position in Gaza under close IDF supervision to identify the location of our hostages. The language is deliberate, supervised access, controlled movement, a process overseen at every stage. The work of locating remains is slow, sensitive, and often painful. For families, these searches carry emotional weight that cannot be measured in political agreements. The return of a body is both an end and a beginning. Closure, grief, the final acceptance of loss. But even this process is contested." In Tel Aviv, demonstrations continue in what has become known as Hostages Square. Families gather with placards bearing names, photographs, and ages. They chant, they stand in silence, they light candles. Some carry yellow ribbons, others hold banners calling for accountability or urgency. Their message is clear. The return of remains cannot be delayed, bargained, or deferred to future negotiation cycles. They want their loved ones home, not eventually, but now. The Hostage Families Forum, a major organisation representing relatives, has gone further. It has called for Israel to suspend the next stages of the ceasefire agreement until Hamas returns the bodies of all hostages believed to be inside Gaza. This marks a shift from earlier messaging that focused primarily on the rescue of living hostages. Now, after months of waiting, families insist that dignity and closure are unquestionable priorities. On the other side of the border, the situation is stark and deeply challenging. The Gaza Strip remains scarred by the aftermath of 2 years of war, collapsed buildings, deep craters, entire neighborhoods reduced to rubble. In the southern city of Khan Yunis, the traces of bombardment are visible block by block. Roads are broken, infrastructure is shattered, and many areas remain inaccessible or unsafe. For search teams and local rescue volunteers, every dig risks uncovering both victims of conflict and the remains of those taken hostage. The exchange arrangement under the ceasefire agreement outlines a ratio. For each deceased Israeli hostage returned, Israel is obliged to transfer the bodies of Palestinian detainees. Initially, the agreement listed the return of 28 Israeli bodies. Hamas has publicly stated that the difficulty in locating remains is tied to the extensive destruction in Gaza. Israeli officials, meanwhile, maintain that Hamas bears responsibility for documenting and safeguarding the captives it detained. These discussions are not merely political, they are deeply human. For every name invoked in negotiation halls, there is a family waiting in a hospital corridor, sitting in a living room, standing in Hostages Square, holding a portrait. For every exchange discussed between delegations, there are communities on both sides who mourn. In the midst of this, there have been moments of relief, rare, fragile, and powerful. In hospitals inside Israel, scenes of reunions have unfolded, a freed hostage wrapped in a blanket, stepping into the arms of family members who have waited more than 2 years. The embraces are long and wordless, the expressions a mixture of disbelief and overwhelming release. These reunions have become symbols of what is possible, but also reminders of what remains unresolved. Meanwhile, in the occupied West Bank, buses carrying released Palestinian prisoners move slowly through cheering crowds. Family members reach toward windows, waving, crying, pressing hands against the glass. For many of these families, the release marks the return of a son, a daughter, a brother, or a father who has been absent for years. These scenes mirror the same emotional complexity, hope, relief, and the long shadow of struggle. Yet even joy remains tied to loss. In Gaza, footage shows militants guarding a designated location during the transfer of the bodies of hostages to the Red Cross. The atmosphere is somber. The handover of remains is not a celebration. It is acknowledgement of death under conditions shaped by war. On the ground, Palestinians gather around bodies returned to Khan Yunis. Some weep, others watch silently. Grief in Gaza is layered. Grief for civilians, grief for combatants, grief for the land itself. For many families in Gaza, identifying remains is also the final confirmation of a loss they feared but could not verify. The ceasefire, fragile and tense, remains in place, but pressure grows from every direction. Families in Israel demand full accounting before further concessions. Families in Gaza seek aid, reconstruction, and the means to bury their dead. The international community continues to push for progress, though each step is met with competing narratives and unresolved mistrust. The lifting of the state of emergency in Israel may mark a symbolic moment, an indication that parts of life are being restored in the south. But the reality is that the conflict's emotional and humanitarian dimensions remain unresolved. At the border, the tanks remain. Soldiers walk their rounds. The horizon stretches quiet. But the quiet is not peace, it is waiting. A waiting defined by families on both sides of the conflict. Waiting for names to be confirmed, waiting for bodies to be found, waiting for closure, waiting for decisions that will shape their futures. And for a region where every event echoes back across history, the weight of that waiting is immense.